Listen, strange women lying in ponds distributing swords is no basis for a system of government. Supreme executive power derives from a mandate from the masses, not from some farcical aquatic ceremony or the nice guys on business. Running a business is hard. Being a business leader is even harder. The nice guys bring in top industry pros to help your business prosper in a tough world. Get real advice from real people to get you real results today. Now it's time for the Nice Guys on Business. Here's your hosts, Doug Sandler and Strickland Bonner.
So our guest today on the Nice Guys on Business is Pradeep Kumar. He's a former financial advisor. I guess he's a recovering financial advisor who worked in the marketing and advertising industry. He found his passion as a wellness mentor, as an entrepreneur, as an author, a coach, a Reiki master, as a chromotherapy. Now, I don't even know what that is, so we're about to find out what that is too. Chromotherapy practitioner and acupressure therapist. He and his wife are founders of The Art of Self-Healing. Now, today, we're going to talk about something that we all need more of, that is sleep, and how sleep can actually lead to the healing process. Pradeep, welcome to the Nice Guys on Business podcast.
Thank you, Doug.
I love having you here, and I love dealing with this subject. And can I go back to this chromotherapy? I know that might not be specifically related to sleep. Yeah. Tell me, what is I've never even heard of that.
Yeah, that is just a fancy word for light therapy. So,
okay.
Yeah, so it is a mixture of light and color therapy.
Understood. All right. Well, let's dive into sleep, because I think this is one area that most people that are in our community probably are not getting enough of. And I would tell you, in the 90s, I probably missed most of my anything more than 5 or 6 hours was not happening in my life. I was just so focused on work, and I know it took a huge toll on my health.
Right.
Can we talk about the importance of sleep just from a 35,000 foot view for a second, and then we'll dive in a little bit deeper?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so basically, according to the ancient Indian texts, which is called the Upanishads, deep sleep actually is a state of consciousness, and it passes through 4 different states, which is the waking, dream, and then deep sleep. Actually, there is one more stage to it as well, which is not mentioned much, but it is called Turiya, which is pure consciousness. And so as an individual, each one of us can experience the external world through, these sense perceptions. And as and when we go into various other states, the brain, the way it functions and how we treat ourselves starts telling a lot of different stories. And so that is where we need to actually keep monitoring and finding out as to what exactly needs to be done in order to get to the next state and to the next state from there on. So that, in a nutshell, is essentially what sleep is. And sleep, on the other hand, if you look at it, is the only and most important function of the human system, where it revitalizes and resets and regenerates your entire body altogether. And so I cannot stress the value of sleep.
I think I completely agree with you. And I'd love to talk about, for those that are in our community, to help them maybe take a step towards getting that better night's sleep, better habits to get into. What are some of the rituals or some of the steps that you would need in order to get yourself some better sleep?
That's a great question. Actually, before we get into rituals, the first thing is that you need to understand the value of sleep, what it essentially brings to you. And then you need to get a little bit of education regarding sleep, which is essentially, I would kind of term it as yoga. Yoga, in the sense, the word yoga in itself means union. So union in terms of mind, body, and spirit. And that is when we actually get ourselves rested properly, because in most cases you will find that, you know, people have this sort of a mental diarrhea all the time. You know, they kind of keep on talking to themselves and debating and arguing and all of those things, which needs to actually stop. So bringing harmony within oneself, developing a positive attitude, sort of conquering your own uncontrolled emotions, developing a very peaceful and happy mind. And, you know, you eliminate your stress and your anxiety. And then we get into the sleep rituals. So before we get into sleep rituals, once we have dealt with all of the other things, the rituals, actually, you may not even need it at that point. But then when we talk about rituals, it is something that we conduct as a practice throughout the day, right from morning. As the day passes, you conduct yourself in certain way that during nighttime, when you just apply those things in terms of, let us say, even if it is just to do a chant, just to do a little bit of breathing exercise, just to do a little bit of maybe a head massage or a foot massage. These things then help, because these are just tools. But what you really need to work upon is the rest of the things which, you know, leads you to the sleep rituals. So that's essentially what I'd like to focus on.
All right. And before you go into either the rituals or the things even beforehand, how do you get your brain into a spot where you actually can conquer some of these demons that are going on? You know, as you were talking about, well, here's some of the things that we need to do before we even get to the rituals. We need to, you know, maybe stop some of the negative self-talk or the mental diarrhea, as you call it,
Right.
which is great. Easier said than done. Are there some things that you can do to stop those, or to, you know, to at least be aware that those are even going on? Some people aren't even aware that they have this negative talk, you know, going on in their head.
Yeah. So basically, you know, according to the yogic sciences, attitude is of prime importance. So when I talk about attitude, it's about acceptance, it's about gratitude, it's about forgiveness, it's about detachment. So when you bring about these aspects into your day-to-day life in a conscious way, you're able to achieve that. Also, in ancient India, there are certain 16 faculties of mind, which, you know, just for making it even more easy for the sake of public knowledge, we will just boil it down to 4. So intellect is 1. Intellect is something which basically is always very logical. And then there is identity, which we call in Sanskrit as ahankara. And then there are memories. And when we talk about memories, there are almost 8 different kinds of memories, which are elemental memory, atomic memory, evolutionary, karmic memory. Karmic memory basically is derived into 2. One is a xylo of memories, and the other one is active memory. And then there is sensory memory, inarticulate memory, and articulate memory as well. So when we are talking about mind, it is just not from a intellectual point of view. You have to really break it down into pieces and then understand what exactly you are stuck at. And then you try to identify those areas and then work on those areas in order to calm your mind. So easily said, I could say, okay, if you do a couple of breathing techniques, you may achieve that mental calm. But we are not actually trying to cure the symptoms. We are trying to basically eliminate the source.
Right.
So that is very important. And that is why I go in such great detail about the reasons that what we have to look into, because intellect is something what we all depend on, and that's where we gauge a person's smartness and things like that. But essentially, if you think about it, what is an intellect? It is nothing but logical reasoning of things. So, for example, if I showed you a flower, the only way you would probably look at that flower is, oh, I want to know what exactly is this constructed of. And so you try to dissect it. And so that takes away the entire beauty of that flower altogether. But that's how intellect works. So we got to go above and beyond of that mindset, and then understand what is it that we are trying to achieve. Why is it that we are doing what we are doing? And so when we understand all those nuances, then we start treating ourselves differently and then accepting things in a much more easier manner than getting it all complicated.
So Pradeep, as you're explaining the process, I'm listening and I'm trying to keep up in terms of like the graph that you're following down. There's 7 of these or 6 of those. My whole brain goes to, I just want to go to sleep. Not because your message was not something that it captivates me, but the idea of having to think in order to make this happen is really, it's almost like it seems like it's counterproductive to getting to sleep.
Right.
Are there certain things that we can do, any practices that would be fairly unique that we could use to let go? Some people say, if you try some breathing techniques, or if you try meditation, or if you try music,
Right.
or if you try to eliminate, television, or some of the activities that we do oftentimes before we go to sleep.
Right.
Are there some steps that we can take to?
We can absolutely do. Like you rightly pointed out, there is pranayama, which is called the breathing techniques. So if you perform certain breathing patterns, because breathing is essentially associated with our entire life. So when we are angry, your breathing takes a totally different pattern. When you are, showing affection to someone, your breathing takes a whole different level. And so that regulates a human body totally. And so when we do the right kind of breathing exercises, it calms down the mind. It, improves your sleep quality. It basically increases your mindfulness. Reduces your blood pressure totally, improves your lung function, and your cognitive performance gets improved. And all of your cravings are, brought down to a bare minimum. So yes, breathing exercises is a big thing. The other thing you mentioned was meditation. Of course, yes, meditation is absolutely great. But that very word is so misleading, in my opinion, because meditation, people have made it to be something so difficult yet so easy. But but it's a mixed bag totally. The word meditation is not there in the Sanskrit language. We call it as dhyana. Dhyana meaning focus. That is the word. So whatever it is, they've made meditation to seem like such a fancy thing. So when you just told me a while ago that listening to what I had to explain, it almost puts you to sleep. And so that is one thing which we need to pay attention to, and that is focus. And so when we lack focus, that means there is essentially our well-being is affected, because I always say that sleep is the barometer to your wellness. And so in case if you're unable to sleep, that's a clear message given by your body right there, that there is some, things that need some correction in terms of your wellness on your whole. And one of the major challenges these days with social media and every other channels out there, focus has become a big challenge. And so these very same people are trying to do the meditation in order to gain that focus when they have limited capacity to enhance their focus. So I think a lot of attention needs to be paid in that area. Only then you can actually attain the state of meditativeness. And yeah.
So those in our community that are listening to this, Pradeep has a book called Sleep Code, A Practical Guide to Attain Deep Sleep. I'm going to put a link in the show notes so that you have access directly to his website and a PDF version of the book. Pradeep, absolutely 100%. There was no disrespect at all. I wasn't referring to what you were telling me was putting me to sleep. It was more the process.
I know. I get
it. I was not. There was no insult in that. It was more the process itself. Can we talk about the role that emotions play in us getting a restful night's sleep? I can imagine that those of us that are out there that are entrepreneurs running our own businesses, have kids, have a family, have busy lives, we are so caught up in the vortex of emotion sometimes that it does play a challenging role, and we are going breakneck speed right up to the point where we get into bed. And I know that's got to take a toll on how we get if we get a restful night of sleep. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Emotions, rightly put, is one of the major emotions we find is anger, pride, and envy. And these are all associated with something which I mentioned earlier, detachment. So that is a practice that we need to basically bring into play. So our emotions are always associated with being attached to something. And that attachment is something which basically, leads us to nowhere. And so the better we bring those emotional pain, emotional wounds, those obsessive emotional chatter, everything under control, because our minds just let these go in a spiral that we find ourselves in superficial or endless flood of emotional thoughts over and over again. And that is a disastrous recipe to put you to rest. Mm-hmm. When we talk about sleep, it is equivalent to rest. And when we have this restless thoughts in our mind, obviously that's the emotion coming into play right there. And in order to arrest those thoughts, you need to understand how to detach yourself, because we always identify ourselves with things. We identify ourselves with the house, but really, are you the house? No. We identify ourselves with the relationship. It's great to have relationship, but I'm not saying we have to be detached in the sense that we should not be caring. You have to understand where to draw that limit. When we take things, over and above the limit, that is when we start finding things, spiraling out of control. As long as we do those essential practices in order to get them under control, life should be easy, because there is nothing else other than being separating yourself from all those things around us. The more we get involved with them, more we think we have to identify ourselves with it. That becomes complicated. And so there are almost like 5 steps that you can take. The first thing is what is called as cleanliness. Cleanliness, I don't mean in terms of just your physical body. Cleanliness from the standpoint of your mind as well. And then contentment. Contentment in terms of whatever it is that you have, you need to find happiness in it, and even better, contentment in it. And then you got to be disciplined over your burning desire. And then you got to self-reflect yourself. And then you got to understand that there is always a higher power somewhere operating. And then you just give it in there. You just surrender to that higher power. And that will really bring down all of these noises which the outside world starts creating. When you start thinking of these things from these standpoints, it is much easier for you to reason as to why am I doing what I'm doing? And that will put you to rest quite easily, quite efficiently. But people really don't think about those things. They go after substances or things like that. No, because we've been given this beautiful piece of machinery, which is called as a human body. Unfortunately, this is the only machinery which comes without a user's manual. You know what I mean?
Very
Yeah.
true. So Nice Guy Community, again, his book is called Sleep Code, A Practical Guide to Attain Deep Sleep. I'll put a link in the show notes so that you guys have access to that. So Pradeep, I got to ask, because in your former career as a financial advisor, you probably were the subject of many sleepless or potentially sleepless nights. Was this something that you found as a gift that you needed for yourself, or is this something that you've always been aware of and worked your way into using this as a part of your career?
Thank you for asking that question, Doug, because this was exactly my problem. And being in the corporate world and things like that, it was quite second nature to bring work home every night. And we were, as a young couple at that time, we were worried about things. And once we had our first child, things just got out of control because we didn't know how to handle things. Even though we were born and raised in a family where home remedies and Ayurveda were things which was always practiced at home. Yet we couldn't actually control that, because once we came down to the West and we started getting into new habits and new behaviors and things like that, we kind of really lost our way. And when we started, this kind of suffering that we were going through, we had to stop at a point and started thinking about the lessons that we got to learn during our childhood. Luckily for me, my wife was being one of the strongest partners in my life, had contributed to a great extent in helping me also reflect on what it is that we are missing and what are the fundamentals that we are foregoing and overlooking. And that really brought us back to the basics and to the fundamentals. We started putting that into practice one day at a time. And eventually, we really were able to get to where we wanted to achieve, even though it is, still in the works. We are still doing that every single day. But then that is one thing we need to do. We just need to get better than what it was yesterday. So it is always one step at a time. And that was a great lesson that we learned. And that is what really, made us want to write this book in the first place, because we wanted to share this message with the world so that everybody can understand that it is only up to us to do what we need so that we can take our life to the next level.
If those in our Nice Guy community want to connect directly with Pradeep, the best way to do that is just head over to the show notes. You have access to his group on Facebook, his LinkedIn profile page, his Instagram page also that has a lot of cool photos and a little bit deeper dive into what he does and how he does it, and a little bit of access to the methodologies that Pradeep and his wife have put together. Again, the book is called Sleep Code, A Practical Guide to Attain Deep Sleep, available directly on the at the show notes and the link that we are providing for you. Pradeep, so very much appreciate you sharing your message with our community, and thanks for doing what you do in the world.
Thank you, Doug. It's been an honor. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Nice Guy community, never underestimate the power of nice or the power of a good night's sleep. Special thanks to Pradeep Kumar. All of his information, again, will be directly right there in the show notes. Steve O'Brien, go ahead and take us out of here.
For the Nice Guys on Business, I'm Steve O'Brien. Don't underestimate the power of nice.